What is going on, everybody? This is DerekJ Speaks, and today we are talking about AEW World's End live from the Nassau Coliseum in Long Island, New York, the final AEW pay-per-view of the year that just closed out with the big reveal of this whole mystery angle with the Devil and MJF. After MJF failed to retain his AEW World Championship in the main event in his hometown of Long Island against Samoa Joe, the masked men, some of them at least, who have been terrorizing MJF and people around him for the past several months, were all out there, and they swarmed not only MJF but also MJF's best friend Adam Cole, who was out there in his corner, much like he was at Full Gear. And as they surrounded them, they brought in a steel chair. They both threatened, or they both offered themselves up to be hit over the other because they were trying to save the other one, that being Adam Cole and MJF, were both willing to sacrifice themselves to be laid out by the masked men. But then, as one of the men was about to wield that chair, the lights go out, and when they come back on, we see Adam Cole sitting up on one of the chairs with the four masked men standing behind him. And they all ripped off their masks to reveal themselves to be Roderick Strong, the Kingdom, Matt Taven, and Mike Bennett, who are also now officially the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions after what went down on Dynamite the previous week, and Wardlow, the same Wardlow who returned pissed off and vowed to end MJF. And this was the big reveal of the Devil angle. This whole storyline has been going on for a little while now, and it's had its ups and it's had its many, many downs. But my biggest thing with this whole story has been, as soon as they announced the World's End pay-per-view, that name, everything about this show needed to be the culmination of this mystery in terms of who is behind this, who is the one in control of this whole thing. I was hoping by the time we got to this show, those answers would be revealed. The masks would come off and we would finally get to know who is in charge of this thing, some type of reveal. And they did that on this show with Adam Cole, the same man who has been MJF's best friend going back to the summertime. It's revealed to be him, along with some friends, Roderick Strong, the Kingdom, the same men who Adam Cole swore off, Wardlow. There's never been any kind of interaction with Wardlow and Adam Cole and all these people on TV before. And many people look at this and look at the reveal of Adam Cole being the Devil, and they will call it predictable. And I would agree with that statement. However, I would counter that by saying, so what? Just because it was predictable does not mean it was bad. Because this makes sense. What was the genesis of this storyline? What was the origins of this story between Adam Cole and MJF? Adam Cole wanting a shot at MJF's World Heavyweight Championship. That is the very beginning of this entire story. Their first match that they had on TV was an eliminator match. It went to a 30-minute draw. Then they were forced to pair up together in a tag team tournament. They became friends. They failed to win the tag team titles, but MJF granted Adam Cole a shot at his championship in the main event of the Wembley Stadium show at All In. And what happened in that match? Despite his best efforts, Adam Cole did not win the championship. He lost. MJF won. They were the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions, so they were champions together, so they went on to defend their championships, but MJF was the one holding the world championship that everyone else wanted. And he defended that title against Samoa Joe. on the same show where Adam Cole, in an attempt to go out and cheer for and root on MJF, ended up busting his ankle. So there are reasons behind Adam Cole being the man to screw with MJF over these past few months. What about Roderick Strong? What about the Kingdom? Roderick Strong, he became friends with the Kingdom after feeling rejected from Adam Cole. Now, I don't know how long in advance we're supposed to believe that this alliance has been going on. I'm sure they'll reveal that. But Adam Cole and Roderick Strong are longtime friends. Adam Cole also has a history with Matt Taven and Mike Bennett. He formed the Kingdom faction in Ring of Honor with those two men who still carry on that same name. As for Wardlow, like I said, there's never been any on-screen interaction with these men, but Wardlow is the same man who returned to TV boasting about the fact that he basically buried MJF at Double or Nothing last year. He annihilated him with multiple power bombs and got sweet revenge after months of embarrassment and agony and torture at the hands of MJF. And when Wardlow came back, he promised to bring an end to MJF and be the end of his world, pretty much. So it would make sense that all these men who have some kind of vendetta against MJF would form together to screw with him. And of course, we've had weeks of Roderick Strong claiming that it's Max who's actually the devil. At one point, they even had Adam Cole swear off Roderick Strong as a friend. All this stuff has happened, and it has all led to this moment. So I am not going to be someone who complains about this show and complains about the finish of this show being too predictable, because any other outcome, any other reveal would have been a complete disappointment. There was talks of Jungle Boy Jack Perry being revealed. People were speculating that it could be Jack Perry. And then you had many people talking about how that would be a disappointment and how underwhelming of a reveal that would be. I agreed with that statement. So imagine all the signs pointing to Adam Cole and how everything about this makes sense for it to be Adam Cole and Roderick Strong and company, only for them to come to this show and reveal it to be Jack Perry, or worse, or something or someone so much worse. Then you're just doing a swerve for the sake of doing a swerve, and you're just doing it for shock value. And then you can say, oh, well, that wasn't predictable. But then you'll have those same people who called this predictable saying, oh, well, that was lame and underwhelming. But you can't really please those people. As for me, which is why you all are listening anyway, I thought it was good. I'm very curious to see where this goes from here. I was paying attention to Adam Cole because along with the reveal of him being the devil, I was also trying to pay attention to see if maybe the injury was fake, the ankle injury, or not even necessarily fake, but maybe it was exaggerated a bit. But even towards the end there, as everyone was standing over MJF's prone body, Adam Cole was still limping. He was still limping around. He was still, favoring the ankle. So clearly he is still injured. So that is one thing about this story, is that where do we go from here? We can get some matches with MJF against Wardlow, against Roderick Strong, against Matt Taven and Mike Bennett, either in singles or against both of them. But the ultimate payoff here has got to be MJF versus Adam Cole again later on down the line. We don't know when that's going to be. If we are to be believed that Adam Cole's injury is legit and he is truly hurt, and we don't know for sure the timetable of when he'll be able to be cleared, then we don't know when he'll be able to step back into the ring with MJF. Could this storyline really go on that long? Could we spend nearly half of 2024 with MJF feuding with these guys? I don't want to see that. I don't think that's a smart decision to make. So they got to find a way around that, or find a way to come to some kind of conclusion early on and then maybe come back around to it when Adam Cole is healed up and we can get the match proper. But Adam Cole in this position where he can cut heel promos on Max and really hype up the other four guys, that could be something interesting. So we'll see how that plays out. But buried in all this is the fact that there was a main event match where we saw a new champion crowned. Samoa Joe, after working over MJF's injured shoulder. Of course, MJF went into this match with a torn labrum, had a dislocated hip. The man was in complete agony heading into this match. And I was holding out hope that coming out of this show, we would get a new champion in Samoa Joe, and that's exactly what happened. Joe locked in the coquina clutch. At one point, Adam Cole, he was trying to fish around for the Dynamite Diamond Ring, and of course he didn't get it in time. Joe locked in the clutch. MJF tried to escape it. He tried to reverse it and turn to a pin cover, but Joe just put the clutch right back in, and the referee did the lift the arm and drop it thing, and it happened for a third time. Now, there was a bit of an awkward way in which it happened, in that once the referee, Bryce Remsburg, dropped it for that third time, he kind of looked for a second and then called for the bell after that, which made the finish come off a little bit awkward. I think the idea here was that they were trying to play up the fact that even the referee was surprised by this finish. And I think even on commentary, Excalibur, and then they were mentioning how the timekeeper and the ring announcer, everybody was just so shocked they didn't know what to do. So I think that was the mindset behind the referee having that slight delay. It came off a little bit awkward, and it made the finish come off very abrupt and out of nowhere. But I think I understand what the idea was behind that reaction. But more importantly than all that stuff, Samoa Joe, this is a man who has been in the wrestling business for so many years, and I am not going to get into his WWE run too much, but I'm just saying this is a guy who was in WWE for so many years. He had so many opportunities to win, whether it was the Universal Championship or the WWE Championship. He had so many opportunities to be in these big-time main event roles, and they never pulled the trigger with him. Now, some of that was his own fault. He did get snake bitten with multiple injuries, and it was just very bad luck for Samoa Joe there. But ever since coming to AEW, he has been on fire. He has been a complete wrecking crew destroyer. And when they had that first match with Joe and MJF a few months back at Dynamite Grand Slam, even then I was hoping that maybe there's a chance Samoa Joe could win that championship. If for nothing else, it could be a short, brief token run, and MJF can win it right back at a later time. But here on this show, I was hoping for a Joe win, and that's exactly what we got. Samoa Joe main eventing a pay-per-view and walking away as the AEW World Champion. It's a little unfortunate that it got overshadowed by the whole devil stuff, but we knew that was going to happen. Regardless of what the outcome of the match was, we knew going into the show that there was most likely going to be some big reveal with the devil angle, and that would take precedence over whatever the outcome of the actual match was. And that's exactly what happened here. But we cannot lose sight of the fact that Samoa Joe is the new World Heavyweight Champion. The obvious go-to for what's next for him is that MJF will work his way back and get that championship back from Samoa Joe. In fact, I almost expect that to be the case. But do we have to go to that immediately? Do they want Joe to have the championship for a few weeks or a month or two and then immediately drop it to MJF? Or would they like to have him engage in feuds with other people? There's a few names who weren't on this show. Hangman Page, someone who got attacked by the devil and his henchmen. The same devil and henchmen who were in cahoots with Samoa Joe. Maybe there's a way to tie that in and we can get Hangman challenging Samoa Joe for the championship. One name that I like is a name who was on this show in an undercard match that really didn't mean a whole lot, but he looked strong in the match. That's Swerve Strickland. Now, on TV a couple weeks ago, we saw a backstage face-off between Swerve and MJF, and that hyped up a potential big main event match for an AEW pay-per-view at some point in the future. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon, but that was just a tease of what we can expect later on down the line. I would love for Swerve to come around and be a challenger for Samoa Joe. I know these are both heels, But let's face it, these fans don't give a shit if Swerve Strickland is a heel. On this show, Swerve Strickland stomped on Dustin Rhodes' ankle onto a cinder block and embarrassed who many people see as a wrestling legend, and the fans were cheering their hearts out for Swerve the entire time. They were doing the Prince Nana dance. They were fully in support of Swerve the entire way through. Even when he was beating them down and hitting them with kicks and stuff, the fans were chanting one more time. So clearly these people are well behind Swerve Strickland. I don't doubt for a second they wouldn't get behind him in a feud against Samoa Joe for the World Championship. Samoa Joe defending the title against Swerve Strickland could be your championship main event for the Revolution pay-per-view in March, if they wanted to do that, if they wanted to go that route. So, just putting that out there. But I will also put out there that it is highly likely that MJF, even with this devil stuff still going on in the background, he will find his way back to Samoa Joe and win that championship right back from him. It is very likely that that's going to happen. But till then, I would like to think that maybe MJF will take a step back from the world title scene just for a little while, feud with Cole and his goons, and then Joe can face fresher opponents like a Swerve Strickland. That's just me. As for the rest of this show, let's get into this pay-per-view proper, about 16 minutes in. Top to bottom, this was one of the more disappointing AEW pay-per-views I think I've ever seen. And by default, it's one of the most disappointing pay-per-views of the year. There was about 10 or so matches on the main card itself, and if you go by that logic, having 10 matches on your main card and only the last 3 matches really made this show feel big time, that's not necessarily a good thing. The problem for me is that none of those earlier undercard matches felt pay-per-view worthy. This is a pay-per-view that fans have to purchase money. They have to purchase to watch. And none of those matches felt like they were worth the purchase of a show like this. We've been getting excellent, incredible matches on free television for the last month with the Continental Classic itself. That Continental Classic saved AEW television for the last month or so, for both Dynamite and Collision. So we've seen these great matches on free television, and you come to this pay-per-view that many people are paying for, and a lot of those matches back-to-back is like, this is stuff that belongs on Dynamite, or worse, this belongs on Rampage, or worse, it belongs on AEW Dark, and AEW Dark hasn't been a thing in months. So that was kind of my mindset about a lot of those earlier matches. But we did, along with the main event, we did have some other big-time matches that are worth talking about, including the TNT Championship, the no disqualification match for the TNT title, Christian Cage defending against Adam Copeland after a string of those undercard matches really crapping the bed or just under-delivering and just not being anything overly special or exciting on this big final pay-per-view event for the company of the year. A lot of them just very disappointing. You get to this match, and this was like a shot of adrenaline because Copeland and Christian came out there and they absolutely killed it with their match. The match between Copeland and Christian Cage, this no DQ match for the TNT Championship, was incredible. It was great. It was all action from the word go. There was craziness in the ring, at ringside, up the ramp, on the stage, in the crowd. So much craziness. You had kendo sticks, you had chair shots, you had some fumbles along the way, but for the most part, it was just a consistent stream of action. You had Nick Wayne out there, you had his mom out there, all playing factors and roles in interfering in this match and helping Christian Cage have an advantage over Adam Copeland. But for a while there, it just wasn't enough. And we got to a point where, and they mentioned this because Adam Copeland was wearing some very familiar attire. He was wearing the same attire that he wore at WrestleMania 22 against Mick Foley. The same night where Edge speared Mick Foley through a flaming table. And it became very apparent that that is what they were setting up. A table was outside the ring in a very familiar spot, and Christian Cage and Nick Wayne brought out some lighter fluid, and they drenched that table with it. They lit it on fire. Christian got back in the ring. He was attempting to throw Adam Copeland out through the flaming table, but Edge, or Copeland I should say, he countered it with a spear. Unfortunately, the flame on the table went out, and so there was a very awkward couple of seconds where, as Adam Copeland is dousing the table with even more lighter fluid, Nick Wayne, who is very clearly going to be the person to go through this flaming table, is having to sell and pretend like he's still hurt, and he's just kind of standing there on the apron waiting for Copeland to do it. And then he finally gets the table all set up, finally lights it on fire, goes to powerbomb Nick Wayne through it. He tries to do it immediately because the table's on fire, so they want to capitalize on it. They don't want it to go out again. So he powerbombs him through it, but then the table does not break. Nick Wayne barely grazed it. He got some of the fire, but not nearly enough of it, and the landing for him wasn't all that great. So unfortunately, the spot did not turn out exactly the way that I'm sure they wanted it to, but it is what it is. But back in the ring, Copeland did hit Christian with a kill switch, and he won the TNT Championship. However, he was not able to escape this night with that TNT Championship because Luchasaurus, who was renamed Kill Switch a few weeks ago by Christian, he won a battle royal on the pre-show that entitled him to a TNT Championship match anytime, anyplace, anywhere. And so as Copeland is celebrating his win, we see from behind Kill Switch arise. He attacks Copeland, lays him out, and he is going to basically cash in his contract. However, Christian stopped him and basically forced him to surrender the contract over to him. And despite of some initial hesitancy, Christian was really enforcing the point to the point where Luchasaurus had no point. He had no choice, I should say, other than to hand over the contract. Now, why Christian has such this strong mental hold over Luchasaurus, I don't know, but he still did it. Christian cashed in the contract. He hit Copeland with a spear, and he won back the TNT Championship as if it just didn't happen. Like I said, the match itself, the no DQ match, was great. All action. This part with the contract and the cash in, didn't like it. I understand the heel psychology of it. Christian is a dick. Of course, he is going to have some influence over Luchasaurus to do this whole thing, and it makes sense and all that. I get that. The initial concept itself of there being something to cash in on to get this championship match, I felt was pretty lame. They just stole the Money in the Bank concept, which in and of itself in WWE has become very lame over the past couple of years. It's the same tired stuff, and it's situations like this that just cheapens championship victories. It's good heat, but in the end, it just comes off very lame. And this was a very lame way to close out this chapter of the story, which will clearly continue. I could see somewhere down the line, we're going to get Copeland and Christian one more time. They'll probably put him in a steel cage or something like that to prevent outside interference. But on this particular show, I thought that part was pretty lame. Something that was not lame was the finals of the Continental Classic between Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston. He had Bryan Danielson on commentary, clearly was not impartial. He wanted Jon Moxley to win. This whole tournament, these past couple of weeks, has been incredible. Some fantastic wrestling. If there was space on my top 20 countdown, I probably would have put some of those matches on there, even as honorable mentions, but they were all great. And so coming into this, I knew this was going to be a great final, and it was. It was very stiff, it was very intense, it was very brutal, and Jon Moxley wanted the best out of Eddie Kingston, and he absolutely got it, to the point where it was a spinning back fist that took down Jon Moxley and gave Eddie Kingston the win and made him the new Triple Crown winner and the winner of the first ever Continental Classic in AEW. He was he was awarded or re-awarded his New Japan Strong Championship and ROH World title, all that he put up on the line, and the brand new AEW Continental Championship. A nice looking belt. Whether it means anything or not in the end, we'll see. But for Eddie Kingston himself, the whole idea of being a Triple Crown champion and all that, that goes back to 90s All Japan stuff. And this is something that Eddie Kingston has embraced many times. And he has reinforced over and over again that how deep his fandom of 90s All Japan is. And clearly the same with Tony Khan. Do I personally care that much about a Triple Crown champion and winner? Not necessarily. If you're going to do a classic like this, I would have preferred the reward being a future shot at the AEW World Championship or something that has to do with the current titles that you already have, instead of creating a brand new one and incorporating two other championships from two different companies. But because it meant so much to Eddie Kingston himself, that is what made this victory feel all that more emotional, and how I could buy into it, and how when Moxley and Eddie hugged afterwards, that felt very passionate and cool. And knowing how a lot of Eddie's idols, like Misawa, like Kawada, like Kobashi, like Giant Baba, all these different names that many people probably don't know about from that era of wrestling in Japan, with all these Triple Crown winners, knowing that all these heroes that Eddie Kingston idolized when he was younger all held a Triple Crown championship, and now Eddie holds that same distinction. That's pretty cool. So, great stuff there. So those were the three big main event matches on this show. But like I said, as for the undercard, not a lot of strong stuff. I mentioned Swerve and Dustin Rhodes. This was originally supposed to be Swerve versus Keith Lee, but unfortunately Keith Lee was too injured to compete and be cleared for this match. Keith Lee versus Swerve Strickland is a match that has been a year in the making, and Tony Khan inexplicably just dropping the storyline and not having any payoff for it after what took place a year ago. Fast forward to now, they finally come back around to it at a point when Swerve is hotter than ever, and Keith Lee, despite a couple of wins on Collision, is not really doing a whole lot. They announced the match for the pay-per-view, which to me looked like, look, it's just a way to finally blow this thing off and tie up this loose end. It's damning the fact that it took this long, but they're finally going to pay it off, and Swerve can get the win. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. This match is clearly cursed and just cannot happen. So instead, Dustin was the replacement, and it was very, very, very goofy that Swerve stomped on this man's ankle onto a cinder block, and then he still wrestled for another 10 or so minutes. But I will say, Swerve looked very strong and dominant throughout most of that time. Dustin got some hope spots in there for himself, and got a nice near fall when he hit the crossroads. But it was Swerve who hit 2 house call kicks, stomped on his arm, and hit a diving stomp off the top rope down onto Dustin Rhodes that gave him the much needed and well-deserved win. We had 2 women's matches on this show, 2 women's championship matches. The AEW Women's World Championship, Toni Storm, timeless Toni Storm that is, defending against Riho in a match that the fans were into, if for no other reason other than the fact that they liked Toni Storm and his gimmick, which I do too, which is the only real saving grace of this match. As a match, it was fine, but again, it was nothing all that different than a women's match you would see on Dynamite or Rampage or Collision. There was nothing special about it whatsoever, and Toni Storm got the win. So nothing really spectacular about it. The TBS Championship match between Julia Hart and Abaddon. I'm sorry, I know both women have their talents. Julia Hart has improved tremendously. I'm glad to see Abaddon getting a spot on a pay-per-view. That's good for her. But the match itself had no business taking place on this pay-per-view. If anything, it belonged on the pre-show. But outside of that, this is a match that should not have happened on this show. Julia Hart did get the win after some interference from Sky Blue, her new ally. But yeah, this match did not belong on this pay-per-view. We got a match between Andrade, El Idolo, and Miro. Of course, Andrade is the client of CJ Perry, who is Miro's wife. This was a pretty good match. This was like one of the earlier matches on the show that was actually pretty good. It was very good. But again, not anything overly better than what you saw in the Continental Classic or any match that you could see on an average episode of Dynamite or Collision, where we get great matches basically every single week. This was nothing that stood out above any of those other matches, but I thought it was very good. It was a very physical fight between these two that I enjoyed. And Miro ended up getting the win thanks to some help from his wife. So at one point when Andrade had Miro locked in the figure 8, the referee was distracted, and CJ, she swiped Andrade's hands from underneath him, and that provided enough of a distraction for Miro to eventually reapply his game over submission and got the victory over Andrade. After the match, it didn't really seem like they were in cahoots or anything. It looked like that was kind of CJ Perry's own decision to do that, and Miro didn't really have anything to do with it. So that carries over into that story. So that's probably the next direction for Miro. As for Andrade, according to Fightful Select, it looks like this could have been his final night in AEW. They're reporting that his contract might be up, and this show was probably the last appearance that we will see from Andrade in AEW, which is a shame. Andrade, when he initially came into the company, he should have been built up and he should have been presented in a much stronger fashion. But I have a laundry list of guys who I could say that about in AEW, unfortunately. So I don't know how soon we'll see him back in WWE, but that is a company that is being ran by a man who did Andrade right in NXT and built him up very well in NXT. And it is the same company that houses Andrade's wife. The same wife who is going to be off of television for the next year or so, but still. So it's just a matter of how soon will he make his way over to WWE. We shall see. We also got a couple of 8-man tag team matches on this show. We opened up with a fun 8-man tag with all the other members of the Continental Classic. We had the team of Brody King, Jay White, Roosh, and Jay Lethal losing to the team of Mark Briscoe, Daniel Garcia, Bryan Danielson, and Claudio Castagnoli after Garcia avoided a lethal injection from Lethal and got a jackknife cover for the pin. So whatever story they're telling with Daniel Garcia, it was playing out in this match. The fans were into him. This was a hot start to the show. I did enjoy this match. This was a fun little opener for the show. Just a way to get all these guys onto the pay-per-view. I thought it served its purpose. The same cannot be said for the other 8-man tag team match, where the Don Callis family teamed up with the AEW tag team champions Ricky Starks and Big Bill to take on Sammy Guevara, Sting, Darby Allin, and Chris Jericho. Jericho came out, and the fans were still singing Judas, but they also gave him a very, very mixed reaction. And as the match went on, you could hear various different reactions and chants from the crowd, such as NDA and Kylie Ray and CM Punk. Even when Jericho came out, they got a shot on the hard cam of there being a sign in the crowd right behind Jericho that said World's NDA. So there was clearly a bit of a reaction for Jericho heading out here. And I save this for last because I will only say this. As of right now, We don't know what we don't know. All we have is very vague, cryptic messaging and talks right now. So I am not going to say or take any type of stance right now until more concrete proof or verbiage or validation comes out. We have not heard anything from any party involved in this situation. As of right now, I'm recording this at the same time as the AEW media scrum, so I don't know if anyone's on there saying anything about this. For all I know, they are. Maybe they aren't, but I don't know. I don't know anything, and a lot of you people don't. There are certain people who do. The people who do know, they know, and if they are going to say anything about this, then I hope they do, because this is some serious stuff that's been going around all day. And it wouldn't be the day of an AEW pay-per-view if there wasn't some embarrassing backstage news coming out about something regarding one of their talents or multiple talents. So that was very fitting. But I am not going to take a stance on anybody right now. That might disappoint some people. Quite frankly, that's not my concern, because these are people's lives, and it is so easy to just flippantly say, oh, fuck this guy and this person, I believe this person, and that person's awful, or that person's a liar and this person's innocent. It's very easy to say that when you don't know anything. So I hope something more concrete comes out. It might not, since apparently there's something to do with NDAs involved. But if the courts get involved, we'll find out. But until then, I don't really have much to say about it. As for the match, because there was a match that took place here, who won the baby faces? Well, yeah, Sammy. He hit a shooting star press on Ricky Starks. So Sammy pinned one half of the tag team champions. I'm sure that will set up Sammy and Jericho, who just recently reunited. I'm sure it'll set them up for a tag team championship match, seeing as how Jericho's original partner, Kenny Omega, is out battling diverticulitis. So still best wishes to him. But that about covers the show. There were a couple of other pre-show matches. Hook retained his FTW championship over Wheeler Yuta. Chris Statlander lost to Willow Nightingale. And of course, I mentioned the Battle Royal. Other than that, like I said, up and down the card, those earlier matches, nothing was very standout about those matches. You had some 8-man tag team matches that easily could have main evented any episode of Dynamite or Collision. You had a TBS championship match that did not belong on this show at all. And you had a bunch of other matches that, even if they were good, there was nothing really marquee stand out about them. Whereas those last 3 big main events definitely stood out. And of course, the big finale in the end, I'm very curious to see what they do regarding Adam Cole and this whole devil angle. But that about covers it for yours truly. Thank you all for tuning in and listening to me ramble on about this show. It's a long review for a very long show, and I thank you all for keeping up with me. And as always, if you like what you see, you like what you hear, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, comment down below what your thoughts were on this show, and follow me on Twitter /X at DerekJ Speaks. Happy New Year to all of you. Take care. Love you all. Check you later.